Welcome to the only show bringing cops and the community together for some real talk and some real listening. This is uncut. This is uncensored. This is Black and Blue Live. Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Black and Blue Live. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Dale. If you don't know me, I am the host of this show. I appreciate each and every last one of you for checking out this show and coming on. We got a real cool show for you here today. Real powerful, real poignant. I appreciate everybody for coming on. So also, make sure you check out the show right now. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So on one of those platforms, make sure that you check us out, and we'll get your comments on. And so today's show, we're going to be talking about something real powerful. Unfortunately, my co-host that's usually here, Elizabeth, she is not here, but we got somebody real important that can fill in for her. So everybody, please welcome the incomparable man from San Diego's finest. Everyone check out my man, Captain Ben Kelso.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It's going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to this, man. I'm good. Hey, the Chargers won today. Right?
The Chargers won today. Yes.
If that's not something to be excited about, what is?
It's not. It's really not. It's really not.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But thank you for filling in for Elizabeth. I'm sure she'll check out the show when she can. But in the meantime, today's shows we're going to be talking about drunk driving. We got our first comment here from Liz Atkins on Facebook. She says, "How you been?" Hey Ben.
Hey. So hey Liz.
Yes, thank you for everybody that's going to be commenting on this powerful topic. We got, like I said, we're going to be talking about drunk driving and the impact it has on the offender, the person making that choice to get behind the wheel intoxicated, and the impacts on the community, everyone around them, from the people that they hit and the families that they have to deal with after that. So let's bring on our guests that are going to talk about this important topic. Our first guest here, he is a lieutenant with the California State University over here in California, San Bernardino campus. Everyone, please help me welcome in Lieutenant John Gutierrez.
I got a bad feeling about it.
Hey, everybody.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing well. I'm blessed and fortunate to be here with you and Ben, and to talk about this important topic. We're talking about DUI and the impacts that it has on so many in our community. And so thank you for having me on the show.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Let me say, this is one of the #1 podcasts. I don't know if you know it. Everyone's watching, everyone's streaming, and we love what you're doing. And listen, keep up the great work.
Appreciate you there. One of our guests, if you are listening, one of the guests here, if you are listening to the show, please mute that because we got the feedback coming on here. I don't know if that's you, Ben, John, one of the other guests. Please mute that. You were in the show. You don't need to listen to it too. So at any rate, our next guest here works for the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Everyone, please help me welcome in Miss Jacqueline Epina. Where is she? She was here a second ago. What happened, Jackie? Oh, I think she... Are you there? We hear you. We don't see you. This is live. We don't see you, but we will...
My camera's on. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I think there's a technical difficulty. We'll get you on here. Don't worry about it. And our last guest here, she has been impacted by a drunk driver. Everyone, please help us welcome in Dr. Jaco McCowan. She's not coming on either. We're having some problems. How about this? We got everybody there. What's going? How about that?
Oh, okay.
There we go. How about Jackie? Are you there? Jackie, what happened to you? I think we got a technical difficulty, but she'll get on momentarily there. But Dr. McCowan, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here today with one of the #1 podcasts.
Yes,
it's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much. Just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I currently serve as the founder and executive director for And I Stand nonprofit, and we focus on various issues that affect mental health in the communities of color. one of the issues is what we're discussing here today. So I'm excited, and we know that this is a major issue that plagues communities of color. So we advocate, we provide education centered around these topics, and we also take pride in collaborating with MAD. So Jackie, a shout out to MAD. She represents a wonderful organization, and I also am a volunteer of MAD. So it's just a great time to be here. Real quick, shout out to Ben. Found out he was frat.
There you go. There you go.
They basically
Thank you very
explain
much.
that to everybody. Explain that to everybody that doesn't know.
Okay, well, it's that Dove love. That's what it is. Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, of which I happen to be a member, is the only Divine Nine fraternity that is constitutionally bound to Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
Wow.
There you go. We are bound by Constitution, chained to the hip.
We just got schooled. Yes, I appreciate that.
There you go.
Appreciate that. All right. And Jackie, we got you on. We didn't get your proper introduction. Tell everybody about yourself.
So my name is Jackie Pina. I am the state program manager and law enforcement liaison with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I've been with the organization for 5 years.
All right. So we'll definitely call upon your experience here. So yes, and thank you for everybody that's commenting here. We got a Tora Gentry Thomas on Facebook who's saying, can't wait to hear the discussion on this great topic. And thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. So we wanted to talk about, as you see there on the lower banner there, drunk driving and the cost of bad decisions. Actually, we all know that getting behind the wheel when you're impaired is a bad decision, but not everybody knows when they should not be getting behind that wheel, because everyone thinks that they're Superman or Superwoman and that they can get through that situation. So we'll talk about that. We got Liz Atkins on Facebook saying that her mother was killed by a drunk driver. So I appreciate you for your story there. We're gonna have some pretty poignant stories here today. What is everyone's experience here with DUI? John, I know you're a police officer. Why don't you tell everybody about your experience in working in the DUI realm?
Yeah, thank you. I've been a police officer now for 30 years. I started working in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles School Police Department, and transitioned out here to San Bernardino, and then now here at Cal State University, San Bernardino. And over my 30 years, I've made, several arrests for folks for drunk driving who've made that conscientious decision to become impaired and then get behind the wheel. And I'll tell you that my heart, and I want to offer my condolences to everyone across our nation who's been impacted by impaired drivers, or those who've made the conscientious choice to drive while under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And I'll tell you that it never becomes easier, but it just seems like in today's times we're spending far too much money on commercials and ads that promote drunk driving, or promote the sale, not promote drunk driving, but promote the sale of alcohol, when really those dollars should be turned into publications for preventative and intervention versus more or less drunk driving. But I'll tell you that I've seen a lot of crashes, none of them good, and they've impacted so many people in ways that are just unimaginable.
Yep, for sure. And Jackie, why don't you tell everybody what you actually do there for MAD and how long you've been doing it, and some of the things that you get involved with there.
So I do programs. So I'm funded by TxDOT. So we have a program, it's called Take the Wheel Initiative. So there's different components to it. We do community outreach. We attend community coalition meetings. We do law enforcement outreach. We have an annual law enforcement recognition event, and we hold it every year. We also have an impaired roundtable. So that's bringing community stakeholders together, judges, prosecutors, district attorneys, law enforcement, community partners that share our vision and our mission to end drunk driving and drug driving. And then one of our biggest components is our underage drinking prevention program. So that's a lot that we do. We have 2 programs within MAD. It's called Power of Youth and Power of Parents. So we know that you can't have one without the other. So having those conversations with your youth, with your adolescent about alcohol and or marijuana as well. And research shows that children start thinking about alcohol as early as age 8. And in Texas, your average use for alcohol is 12 years old. So we just want to educate the community about, the dangers of underage drinking and what it could lead to also in the future and the consequences that come along with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And we'll talk about that as well. And Dr. McCowan, tell everybody a little bit about your experience in the DUI realm. I think you're muted there, Doctor.
That mute button will get you every time.
Every time.
Every time. In Texas, I just kind of want to piggyback off of Jackie. Things are a little different regarding the laws here because DUI is typically given to minors under, our Texas traffic code. DUIs only are issued to minors under the age of 21, pretty much. And so
really? Here
in Texas, yes. So it's two different things. And basically anybody who has a blood alcohol level of 0.08, now they would get a DWI, which is driving while under the influence. So it's two different things. But to be transparent, I've seen and experienced situations centered around this. When you're young and you think you know everything, I feel like I'm talking like my mom now, she's coming out. But when you think you know everything, at times people, think that they can drink 1 or 2 drinks and then, those drinks just sneak up on you, And sometimes not even at no fault of yours, sometimes people can slip things in your drink. So it's very important to always have a designated driver or also, have a driving service on deck like Lyft to help as well. And I know we'll probably talk more about that. But here recently, my experience has been with the loss of my sister-in-law to a drunk driver. So very familiar with DUI, DWI.
Yeah, sorry for your loss as well.
Appreciate it.
Wow.
Yeah, yep. And
I do notice that both Jackie and Dr. McCowan are from Texas, and I did hear you say that the impairment level that is considered there would be 0.08, right? Which is also the same as what we have here in California. It was 0.10 for a long time, and then it was lowered to 0.08. And I found that interesting that you have 2 different classifications of it, one for minors versus one for adults. Have you always had that?
And so going back, so in Texas, it's a DWI, driving while intoxicated. And they do have, I don't know how long they've had it, but for minors, it is driving under the influence. But also depends. It's up to the officer. Even if they are under 21, they could still charge them as an adult and give them a DWI. So it wouldn't be just a Class C misdemeanor. Because for youth, it'd be a Class C misdemeanor. It'd be bumped up to a Class A or B, depending on what it is. But I don't know how long exactly there's been that differentiation. But here in Texas, we do have those 2 different levels.
Yeah. Well, we have the same sort of thing here in California because the level for juveniles in California is not 0.08, it's 0. So if you have 0.01 in your bloodstream here in California, and you're a juvenile, you can be charged.
Yeah, and it's the same in Texas. It's 0 tolerance, right. So any detectable amount.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
So we're on the same page here.
If you're a minor and you're 0.08, then you're probably going to get a DWI. To Jackie's point, so you can be a minor and be charged with a DWI. Yep.
Okay. All right. Got a few more comments here. Chris McCowan on Facebook saying it always depends on the officer if it's DWI versus DUI. Important distinction there. And we appreciate everybody who's commenting here. Vernon Heron on LinkedIn is saying, why don't we hold drunk drivers accountable? And that's one thing I wanted to talk about in later on, but why don't we get to it now? What do you guys think about our laws, the way we treat drunk driving here in this country, do you think that there's enough being done? Do you think the punishment is enough? Do you think we kind of allow things to happen? What are your thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Dr. McCowan.
So, I mean, don't even get me started on the laws in Texas. And now you know Texas is a different beast. We've been on the news several times for different situations regarding our laws. And DWI and DUI is nothing different. It almost seems like you get a slap on the wrist. You'll have repeat offenders that will keep on drinking and driving, and it's like nothing happens until they kill someone. And even then, you have offenders that walk around like nothing, like they did anything. And so our laws definitely need to be stricter. You can get a misdemeanor, but where's the felony? Where's the jail time? Some people get off on probation. And again, it depends on the situation, but our issue in Texas is the repeat offenders, and we keep allowing them to get back on the streets and do the same thing. And so it is sad. It's a horrible situation. Definitely, again, need to make sure that the laws are strict, and we're fighting that good fight with MAD, and I'll let Jackie talk more about that. But MAD is such a great organization that continues to get out there and fight for the community and fight for victims to end drinking and driving.
Yep. Ms. McCowan on Facebook says that he says hold up real quick. He says that laws are too lenient on Facebook there. So yeah, I agree. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. McCowan. I think the laws are too lenient with respect to drunk driving. I think we need to revisit that, and we need to make the penalties a lot stronger and more harsh. I don't think we should someone has to die in order for them to, get a harsh sentence, so to speak. We know this is a systemic problem throughout our nation, drunk driving, and I think we should take a better look at it and try to revisit that and try to make it where we can really see a more significant reduction in the amount of crashes and deaths simply by making the penalties a lot more harsher.
Yeah. I've heard that comparison about our country and other countries around the world for a long time, that other countries don't play when it comes to drunk driving. Yeah. You get your first offense and they'll throw you under the jail. But here in the U.S., it's a different animal for lots of things. Guns. We have a different culture here, and you know how prohibition went. So we love our alcohol here, and the alcohol lobby, I'm sure has a lot to do with that. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Unfortunately.
Oh yeah.
And Patricia on YouTube says people also need to stop being selfish and start thinking about other people. Yep. Facts. 100 on that. 100 on that. Jackie, why don't you continue on that conversation about penalties here in the U.S.?
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with everyone. It's too lenient. I mean, I know that in 2019, MAD helped pass a stricter law, especially on deferred adjudication. Like if it would no longer, when it's your first time, you could get deferred adjudication. So they place you on probation for a limited amount of time, 2 classes, 10 victim impact panels, community service, pay a fine, and so on. So then if you were to get a second DWI offense, they would just classify it as a DWI first, because they reduced that first one to an obstruction of highway, things like that. But in 2019, MAD helped pass the law that even if they reduced it, they dropped it down. If you get a second one, it's going to be a DWI second. It's not going to be a DWI first anymore. But we see it a lot. We have people that have open cases because they haven't gone to court. It hasn't been adjudicated. So it's a DWI first, and then they'll get another DWI first. And like you said, why does someone have to die for there to be harsher penalties? And do something about it. And unfortunately, it's something that we see in society. Until something actually happens to you or your loved one, it's when people actually want to care about this topic or this situation. And it's something that we've seen for a very long time. I mean, MAD's been around for 41 years now, and it's unfortunate that it has to get to that point. I mean, you're still taking a life was lost. So I think it should be the same as if someone was killed in a homicide. Like, why isn't it those same, penalties within the justice system? So I know families see that all the time. Like, someone could be murdered and you could get up to 99 years to life. But when it comes to DWI fatality and intoxication manslaughter, the most someone could get is 20 years.
Mm. Yep. And Vivi V on Facebook says, thanks to Mad for all that you do. You know what? I wanted to really piggyback on that. Everyone out there probably knows what the police departments do. You know, that's Ben and John and myself. We work for police departments. And Dr. McCowan, she got a chance there to talk about what And I Stand does. But, you know, I kind of assumed that everyone knew what MAD is. Why don't you tell everybody, Jackie, what exactly MAD is and what they do and how they came about?
Yeah, so not a lot of people know or they've heard about it, but it's been a while. So MAD stands for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but sometimes people too have that misperception or misconception that it's just women, and it's not. It's an organization that was started by a mother in California 41 years ago because her daughter was killed by a drunk driver. He was a repeat offender, and her daughter was just walking down the street and he ran into her and he ended up killing her. So MAD has been around for 41 years. There's different components to MAD. As I stated, I do programs. But of course, our main one, our most important one is our victim advocate, our victim side, our victim component. Because without that, then MAD wouldn't exist. So MAD is here to help victims. We have resources. We have a 24-hour helpline. So anyone that's been impacted by a drunk or drug driver, and it doesn't matter if the crash happened yesterday, if it happened 20 years ago, or even longer, MAD is there to provide the resources, the support, whether you need support finding like a counselor, or you need to go to therapy, or you need help navigating through the justice system. MAD will be there to accompany our victims throughout the court process, because sometimes our victims are not ready to face that offender, or have to listen to the testimony, or have to look at those graphic pictures of the crash. So we have advocates that will be there through the whole process. If you need help through the civil, finding a civil attorney, because what if they were coming from a restaurant or a bar or somewhere that they could be held liable for that offender's actions? Like, we are there to provide all those resources. We are starting here in Texas a victim support group, especially navigating through the holidays, because again, people are not thinking, like someone that commented, like, they're selfish and they're not thinking about the consequences. And especially with the holidays coming up, it's just such a hard time, especially if it's going to be your first holiday without your loved one by your side.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this program, because we're coming up on these holidays. You know, Thanksgiving's gonna be the first one coming up here, and there's gonna be lots of drinking. Hell, even Halloween parties. People will be going to Halloween parties and consuming. So.
Alcohol is just such a large component in American culture, especially with holidays and festivities and Sundays for football and you name it. Alcohol has always been there as a part of it. Jackie, I have a question though, and I know that MAD provides a great deal of services and support for victims. Does MAD also have wraparound services for offenders who also, in order to really bring them full circle through the incident, they need services as well?
So I'll answer that question, but I know Halloween was mentioned, and I just wanted to say Halloween is not a holiday, but it is one of your deadliest days. Like, it is one of your deadliest days with drunk driving crashes. But going back to that, for offenders, we do have victim impact panels. So everyone that gets a DWI, DUI, even here in San Antonio, I have a great relationship with the municipal court. So even if it's a minor in possession, minor in consumption, those youth still have to attend this class. So they listen to victims and or offenders share their stories of how they've been impacted. But we won't have those resources for offenders, but we can have those resources for the families of the offender, because they are also a victim, because that person also decided to make that choice. So We might not have those same services for offenders, but for the families of the offenders, they're available because, again, they are a victim. They they were affected, and again, that offender is not thinking in that moment of how everyone is affected, but we're there for them as well. And the only
Oh
reason we
yeah.
don't have other services for offenders is because we don't want to have to have our victim like be re-victimized again. Like if they run into them in our office or at an event, like you don't want them to do that. So we just don't want to put our victims through that. They've already gone through enough.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And Tara on Facebook again says, Matt supported our family when we lost my grandma to a drunk driver. It's an awesome organization. Couldn't agree more on that. And before we move on, we got another comment here from, I don't want to try and pronounce that first name, but Ms. Holston on Facebook, or Mr. Holston on Facebook. What laws are currently being discussed to help regulate via Congress? I don't know if anything would be regulated on the national level. Everything would be on the state level. But, you know, answer me. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, Jackie or Dr. McCown, if you guys know. Is there anything being discussed on a national level as far as drunk driving? And I'm sure Matt has some input on that.
Currently, I don't know anything on a national level.
Yeah.
This was a lobbying year, but I know there wasn't. I mean, it's something that it'd be great for it to be on a national level, but currently, I don't believe there's anything available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I agree. So, hey, before we move on, though, your little tag there at the bottom there, both you, Jackie, and Dr. McCowan say you're in Texas, and you, in particular, Jackie, you're in San Antonio. I just came back from me and the fam. We're in Texas a couple weeks ago. We went down to San Antonio and visited your fair city. I like San Antonio. That was my first time there. That's a nice town. We went down to the Riverwalk, saw the Alamo, went downtown. Yeah, I like San Antonio. Really did. Don't like your basketball team much, but I'm a Laker fan. But yeah, all the battles back and forth with the Spurs and Kobe and Shaq all those years. Yeah, you know how that goes. But I do like San Antonio. I had a good time down there. I just wanted to say that. We were talking about education earlier, and John, I know you're in the educational realm now. Well, seems like you've been in your whole career in educational law enforcement. What sort of educational programs have you seen, or what is your current agency doing? I know because you're on the college campus and alcohol is allowed on the college campus. Do you guys do any sort of educational programs on the college level to kind of let them know about drunk driving?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know from the K through 12 perspective, we've always partnered with our partners in the California Highway Patrol for every 15 minutes. That presentation that they have, it's a 2-day presentation that raises the level of awareness to impaired driving, and it's really a presentation that, quite frankly, gives you all the simulations of a actual crash, a DUI crash with victims, and there's mock blood and everything. And if you haven't had an opportunity to check that out, I would suggest everyone check it out. But it's geared towards high school juniors and seniors, and we take the same approach at the university level. At a university, not to say that they advocate for everyone to drink, but we know that do have young teens who are 17, 18 years of age in college now. And, they're around folks who are 21, 22, who are also college students, and they wind up in these places and spaces where they will have a drink. So the goal is to continue that education, that same 15 minutes. It may not be to that degree, but like you said, that 23136 of the California Vehicle Code basically says that there's a zero tolerance for anyone under the age of 21 to have any alcoholic beverage. So I know that at times they may think that, well, I only had one beer and I'm 18, but I'm in college. I kind of feel that pressure, that peer pressure to be, liked or be amongst their peers doing it. But that law, that 23136 of the Vehicle Code, really is a zero tolerance. So it doesn't matter if you have that one one drink and you think you can make it, you just can't do it. And so we try to encourage people to think before they drink, really kind of drive that point home and raise that level of awareness. We do have on the college campus our campus security officers, our community service officers who actually provide rides to and from, the dorm. So if you have someone who's walking home from a class or walking home from a study group back to their dorm, they can get a ride via that service so that they're safe. And the key is really just the safety. I think Dr. McCowan and Jackie mentioned it as well about utilizing an alternative service, something like Uber or Lyft or something like that, or even having a friend who's a non-drinker, that designated driver to help get you to where you need to be. I think we really have to. We can't raise enough awareness to it. It has to be a discussion that's not just left up to the police. It has to be a discussion that's left up to every home. If you're planning an event at home, a birthday party, a kid's party, and you know there's going to be alcohol there, that level of awareness needs to begin right then and there. We don't wait till the end of the day when they get ready to leave. Certainly we should be, thinking about that. We see someone leaving our party and they're impaired, we should be thinking about getting them an alternative ride. But certainly I think the discussion and awareness has to begin soon. It has to begin when you're thinking about putting alcohol or drugs in any type of environment.
Absolutely. And before we move on, it's good. Yeah, go ahead, Ben, and then I'll jump in. Go ahead, Ben.
John has a unique situation. Any sort of college campus, I mean, it's kind of like its own entity, its own sort of cultural system, and in those areas and in those spaces, alcohol, along with drug use and narcotic use, is something that students just do, right? A lot of it is based on, trying to blow off steam and partying, and that whole culture with that. Those things go together. And I know we offer a lot of services for alcohol. Do we offer those same levels of services for drug use, narcotics? You can get a DUI for being under the influence of marijuana. You can be impaired on other drugs. Do we offer those same services at your university and in the system, the UC system?
Yeah, absolutely. I've only been here a short time, but I can tell you that the university doesn't really, promote these things in terms of providing alcohol and stuff like that. But they somehow managed to make their way onto a campus. But our student services, our student services, they do offer a wraparound support in just about everything there is, from mental illness to, alcohol intervention. They provide all of those services. They just need to know. And so our officers act as eyes and ears. And if we see something that we think that they need to know, we make those notifications and we connect them to those services. And we make those services available, to each one of our officers so that they have that knowledge, so that when they see it, they can do it in more real time. They can connect those folks with some type of services. Again, the whole goal is to be an intervention and a prevention piece, as well as the education, because I think that's very important, is the educational piece. We cannot talk about this enough.
We can't. And on that note, you mentioned every 15 minutes. I was going to bring this up, but since you brought it up, let's talk about every 15 minutes here. So every 15 minutes, I'm sure, Jackie and Dr. McCowan, you guys have something similar in your state of Texas, and the viewers in whatever state you're watching this from. Every 15 minutes is a program, a 2-day program, focusing on high school juniors and seniors, which challenges them to think about drinking, driving, personal safety, the responsibility of making mature decisions, and the impact their decisions have on family, friends, community, and many others. I've been involved in every 15 minutes a few times, a few years. There's some of their goals and objectives. There's me at one of the every 15-minute events. This is a mock crash with a student there. You see back there, we simulated a death in that traffic accident. We won't say accident, in that traffic collision. The students get to come out there and watch the whole scene. There's another portion of a mock crash, and they do a really good scene. The fire department will come out and they'll actually extricate people from these vehicles, and the ambulances will come out and do the whole thing. We even had an air helicopter come down, a medevac come down and airlift one of the students out. These are all actors, of course, but it's just to show how powerful it is. As you can see there, look at that. That's crazy, right?
Powerful, very powerful.
Yeah. And
and
we even have the coroners. Yeah. The coroners come out. The coroners investigators come out, and so the students get to see that as well. And you got the hearse that comes out and picks up a body, and they actually see that. These. So you got 11 and 12th graders that come out and see the impact of what their decisions hold on them. And then some of these, we got a Grim Reaper and some of the other students that represent students that have been killed by drunk drivers. So, yeah, it's a great program. I'm sure you guys have something similar in your own states.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal program. Yeah, and if you take a look at some of the expressions on some of these students' face, they're just like in shock and awe. You can see some of them, they're crying. It's all too real to them, and it's really a great educational piece. It doesn't traumatize them, but it does cause them to think.
Yep.
That's great.
And a few of them that participate in the program, like I said, it's a 2-day event, so they'll go through the justice system. They take them to the jails. They'll take them through the court system and let them know what that process is going to be like, that experience is going to be like. So yeah, it's a really eye-opening experience to get them thinking about their choices once they graduate, and even when they're still in school too. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So and I know we talked about this briefly, Dale. Here it's called Shattered Dreams. And it is a two-day event, and I've gone through the process. I've worked with the high schools, and like you said, it's juniors, seniors, and it's not just anybody. It's a whole process of like picking the people, and also then the second day, usually it's the actual funeral, and you'll have someone read the eulogy, and at times too, these students will have to write like a last letter for their parents, like if I'm not here, this is what I have to say. But it's not something for them to be traumatized, but learn and look at all the consequences, and not just look at all the people that are also involved. It's not just like EMS or police, but then the coroner and the funeral home, and it's just a long list of all the people that are affected when there is a drunk driving crash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So everybody,
we start talking about.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead, Dale.
No, I was just going to ask.
I was going to say we start.
Go ahead, Ben. You pull rank.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to, we start talking about the impacts of all of these all the way around, and we see that there's impact definitely on students and on the victims and so on and so forth. But there is also an impact on the first responders, the folks who respond to these scenes. And we don't generally talk about that, and they do a really good job of trying to mask the impact these scenes have on them. But the same issues that we see in our communities with these problems impacts the first responder community as well, both from the victim side and unfortunately from the offender side as well. Do we notice that in John? Do you notice that in your organization, your agency, and Dale, yours?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's the trauma of just being there and seeing that and witnessing that and trying to rescue folks and save folks' lives is traumatic. And Ben, police officers endure a lot of trauma each and every day in everything that they do. But I mean, seeing it like that, as you were talking about it, I was thinking about a friend of mine who's a police officer who early on in his career, he was dispatched to a radio call where it was a traffic collision involved. And so he gets there to the call, and when he gets out, he pulls up, and it's his own mom killed in the crash. So when you think about these type of things, yeah, we endure a lot of trauma, and they're crash after crash after crash after crash, and then they're DUIs after DUIs after DUIs. And there's been some police officers involved in DUIs, and so I would say to them, don't drink and drive. I think that between 2005 and 2011, there's been more than 5,000 police officers who were involved in a crash, a DUI crash, and were arrested for that. So,
Yep.
you know, sometimes I believe, and this is not an excuse, but sometimes that's how police officers mask their trauma that they're dealing with is they, you know, they have a drink and then next thing you know, they forget because they're impaired and then they start to drive. So the educational piece for me to them really is don't drink and drive. And no matter what you're going through, there's some resources that we can connect you with. You can call back to your station and ask for a ride, but there's so many different ways, but we cannot take behind that motor vehicle.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely.
And we were gonna kind of talk about this a little bit later, but John, since you brought up that we're not immune to being drunk driving offenders, Dr. McCown, you have a story as well that we would love for you to tell us all about.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity. I'm sorry. So this is a little hard, but I've told the story, so I'll try my best to keep it together. Um, Pretty much the day I found out about my sister-in-law, Taylor McCowan, it was very unreal. I was at work when I got the message, and I thought she got into a minor fender bender. And so she was going to be okay. But boy, was I wrong about that, right? So to give you a little background on Taylor, Taylor is a twin to Ashley McCowan. So she's she has a twin, and she was born in the Houston area to my mother-in-law and father-in-law, Raquel and James McCowan. Raquel Hatch and James McCowan. So there's five. She has it's five siblings. I'm sorry, in all, and for college. So she went to UTSA to pursue her dream of becoming a nurse. It was there when she was involved in sports and different auxiliary groups. She mentored, she engaged in community service. She joined a slew of Christian groups to help spread the gospel, touching everyone that she came across. And so the night of the fatal crash, and again, we say fatal because it's not and we say crash because it's not an accident. Taylor was coming back from Bible study. She was asked to help out some friends. And so no one could ever imagine that when she left helping out those friends that she would be in a car crash, and she was hit by a drunk driver. And so our family and friends had one question, and that question was why Taylor. Taylor gave with her heart. She gave to anybody that she could, and she tried to hold on for almost 2 weeks. 2 weeks. She ended up losing her battle around, and she was gathered around family and friends. We were praying day in, day out. But the sad thing about Taylor's situation is that she lost her life to someone who was supposed to protect and serve, and that's a U.S. Marshal. And so speaking to y'all today is very vital because police are set to a higher standard. And that standard is to protect and serve no matter what. So there should be no reason why police officers, I don't care what level you're on, why you would not protect and serve and be so irresponsible by taking somebody's life because you decided to drink and drive. And so, pretty much life has not been the same without Taylor. There's definitely a void, and you talk about the holidays. Thanksgiving is coming up. Christmas is coming up, and it's just never going to be the same. She has a niece and a nephew who always mentions her name, so we know she's still here in spirit. They always, always, always are reminded of Taylor. But it's like, why do we even have to get there? Because somebody was very irresponsible by getting behind the wheel. And so, getting behind the wheel when you drink and drive, that's a choice. And so you are choosing to endanger the life of yourself and others. So when the damage is done, you have to be accountable. And so hopefully, we're still in a situation where nothing has been done. We're still trying to fight for Taylor. And it's sad, which again goes back to the broken system that we have in the United States, in Texas specifically, still waiting to get justice for Taylor. So I just say, you know, just to make sure that if you decide to take that drink, do not get behind the wheel. Do not. I don't care if
Do
you
not.
had one drink or two drinks and you feel like, oh, I'm good, I got it. No, have a designated driver, because you never know. You never know.
You never know. Wow. Again, I know I said it before, but we're sorry for your loss and your family's loss. I could only imagine. And yeah, that is terrible.
I appreciate it. We definitely appreciate it. We're still battling the trauma. I mean, it still hurts to this day for a lot of the family members, and it's sad because again, she was a twin, so her twin has to look at her in the mirror. Basically, they were identical.
Wow.
Everyone
Very
has
sad.
to look at her in the mirror.
Everybody.
Actually, everyone.
Everybody.
You see, it's a constant reminder. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
constant reminder.
Dr. McCown, you said something about justice. Can you expand on what you actually mean by that? I think I have an idea. I think you're talking about whatever the legal system or whatever as part of that. Has that been adjudicated, or is that a difficult process to navigate?
It's definitely a difficult process because we haven't received. It's almost like the courts continue to delay, and just because you are an officer doesn't mean that you don't get held accountable for the things that you've done. And it almost seems like because of that, we're still getting delayed. And I feel like if there are other situations that are happening, shootings and stuff, you'll see people that, you know, their court case is seen right then and there. But when it came to Taylor, we still waiting. We still waiting to see. We still have somebody who killed her that's walking around enjoying life, just chilling, and we're mourning, and it's like she's just another name nobody even cares about.
Wait, so
And
he's not
it's
in
like,
custody?
no, he's been walking around just chilling.
Wow.
Literally
Wow.
chilling. And so we haven't
Is he
seen
still
any justice.
employed with that agency?
He's not employed with the agency, from what I know. I don't really know too much
Okay.
about him or care to even talk about him.
Mm.
But I do know one thing: he's out. No
Mm.
justice have been served. We're still waiting. And so, I mean, when it's like, when are we gonna see something happen with the laws? We're just here. And so we're waiting
Yeah.
to get justice for Taylor. And it's almost like, I think um, there was a situation where, and everything is public, but he didn't want to use the breathalyzer. Okay, well, that's what you got to do. You got to make sure that you're accountable for what you're doing. And
Mhm.
so things of that, it's just we're at a loss for words because again, we're still fighting. We have somebody walking around that has not been accountable for taking a life because he decided to get behind the wheel and drive.
Yeah. I hear your frustration,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that frustration is echoed across the panel. And I know Jackie can give us lots of examples of that sort of frustration that victims feel, survivors feel when they're dealing with um, DUI incidents, and the dynamic with the court system, and then you're dealing with the grief and the loss and those sorts of things as well, and they all compound together. So I'm sure it's very frustrating.
Absolutely. And
Always at a loss of words. Can't even talk about it because it's just triggering.
yeah, our viewers are praying for you. Liz Atkins on Facebook saying, praying for you and your family, Dr. McCown. I totally understand. Yeah.
I appreciate it, Liz. Thank you so much.
And Holston again says that it's a situation like this why I believe nationally this pandemic should be addressed. So, all right. Yep.
Be
So-
interesting to know as the pandemic increased or decreased the amounts of arrest or the level of arrest that we see with alcohol. I know that alcohol sales dramatically increased during the pandemic, alcohol and gun sales. So it would make sense,
Make
that
sense.
we saw some sort of increase.
Well, I would hope that at least during the lockdowns, people were staying, within their circle at home, and that's where they were doing the drinking. But I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, guys, what do you think
It's a
can be
heavy
done
topic.
about?
Heavy topic
Yeah,
here today.
yeah. What do you guys think can be done to kind of curb this? What do you guys think we should do to move forward? More legislation, more education. What do you guys think?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think we have to continue to increase the level of education and awareness. And legislatively, I think we need to look at making stricter penalties for this driving under the influence. Because again, until you've been impacted, you don't feel the pain that folks like Dr. McCowan and others, and you don't see the struggle that Jackie has to deal with, and then the police officers on that trauma side of it. So yeah, I think we need to increase the level of education and awareness, Dale, and I think we also need to move forward with some stricter legislation.
Agreed. What do you think, Jackie?
I agree with Lieutenant Gutierrez. A question that we always ask, like the offenders, like they have to do a survey after they do the victim impact panel, and a lot of them, they're like, I wish there was more education when I was younger, or there was more schools that brought certain programs. And I know a lot of times there's certain schools that don't want MADD in the classroom because they feel that if they have us there, that means that there's a problem. And it same goes for universities. Sometimes some schools, universities don't want to have MADD present, but educating from such a young age would, a lot of times they're like, why is MADD so concerned with underage drinking? Especially too because underage drinkers make for such a high percentage of those fatalities, those underage drinking fatalities. So we reduce that, we're also reducing the number of fatalities that are happening. And with the question that was said about the pandemic, yeah, you would think that there'd be less arrests or it slow down, but if we also look at underage drinking in Texas, those numbers like doubled. There was still crashes, there were still fatalities, and there was a lot more people out on the roads. And too, since maybe the roads weren't as congested because people were staying home, but that then encouraged people to drive faster and intoxicated. And again, it's about something I say, just the way you're planning your perfect outfit for that night that you're going to go out, that we're going to be here on a show. You need to plan the perfect way that you're going to get back home, whether it's Uber, Lyft, public transportation, taxi, or your non-drinking designated driver, not the person that had the least amount to drink, but the person that hasn't had anything to drink. But education is a big component, and again, too, stricter laws and holding those people accountable. And going back to what Dr. McCowan was saying is, yeah, that person is arrested, but then they have a bond, and if they post that bond, then they're released. And throughout this whole thing, they're just walking around, still living their life, but our loved one doesn't get that opportunity, and they're never coming back. So they don't have the same freedoms, I guess.
Yep. So we were talking about.
If I can just piggyback to,
sure.
Even us being silent when Mrs. Holston said, "Is there any national laws?" Is telling. It's telling about how important drinking and driving is to our country, and it's sad. And so, piggybacking off of what everybody else said, absolutely more education, being proactive and providing that education. I remember when I was younger, MADD had a crashed car parked right inside of the outside the high school. So as soon as we walked up, we were like, "What is this?" But you don't see that anymore. Seriously, we walked up, we was like, "Who crashed?" And then MADD was, they came, the whole crew was there. "Hey, this is MADD, this is what we're here about." And they educated us when I was young. I remember that. And so we need to start bringing that back. Schools have to stop being, "Oh, I don't want that." And it just shows that somebody is in trouble or something is going on. We need that. We have to stop being so scared and really put things in perspective, because this is the reality of things. The reality is people are dying. The
Yeah.
reality is we don't have strict laws. The reality is, again, on a national level, there's nothing we could even talk about. We're here in silence, like, oh, what is going on a national level? That's the
Yeah.
issue, right, in itself. And so, again, being proactive, the education is imperative. And then also just to advocate, lobby for stricter laws. So continue the good fight that we can do, and having conversations like this is also vital. So thank you again for this platform.
You're totally welcome.
Wow.
And Vernon or Heron on LinkedIn again, if we could pull that back up, says judges and prosecutors need to be held accountable for not applying the law appropriately.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we all can agree on that. It's again, sometimes the officers do their job, write great reports, but then it comes down to the judges and prosecutors. And I mean, I had a judge reach out to me last week, how she's like, one of the criminal defense attorneys was like, if you do this, people are going to think you're way too harsh. And she's like, that's exactly what I want. I don't want them to think I'm being lenient. Like, even if it's just a DWI, like it's going to keep, them off the streets and save lives. But sometimes people are just too scared, like Dr. McCowan said, about, speaking their mind or remaining silent. And I think it's a community thing. It's a collaboration between everyone, all the stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I was going to tell, and I wanted to say this too, real quick. I wanted to say this. There was a situation where we did, as a family, we watched the judge as, well, basically overall, did he lose his job? Wow, he lost his job. Okay, losing his job. Wait a minute, he just took somebody's life. You asked somebody's life. Lose his job? Okay. So again, these judges, again, to your viewers' point, they need to do their jobs, and they really need to enforce the laws.
Agreed.
Yeah, I know. For me, I would be willing to work with anyone to take the conversation nationally to get a national legislation. So, if you know someone or you run across someone, hey, I'd be more than willing to do my part to work with them to do it, because we have to recognize the fact that there is a need, and I think we've done that. Now we just have to rally the cause and get the right folks involved and see if we can draft that national legislation and even advocate for some stronger penalties. So listen, you have my support. If you find someone, just reach out to me and I'll be willing to do my part.
Agreed.
An interesting kind of a caveat on this whole discussion when we start talking about judges and prosecutors. We're also talking about the overall impact on the criminal justice system and incarceration rates and things like that. And sadly, what we're finding is, I'm sure there's disproportionate sentencing in terms of who gets sentenced for these types of crimes. Sadly, I'm sure it is. Because that conversation takes place. Okay, well, who is being convicted of these sorts of crimes, and who is getting those sentences, and who is not? All right, and all of that weighs in, which really makes it an interesting conversation about this and about holding. We can say that about just about every impact of crime that our legal system, those that are in charge of that, really do need to hold people accountable. But it also comes at the cost of potentially incarceration and fines and so on and so forth. But without there being some form of accountability, we don't see big impact. There always has to be accountability of some sort. And I don't care what the crime is, but particularly with DUI.
Particularly, yeah. And since Ben and John and I, we're all in law enforcement, and our respective agencies are out there trying to do DUI enforcement and making sure that impaired drivers are off the streets. So we do that in a number of ways with, Office of Traffic Safety grants and checkpoints and saturation patrols and all those sorts of things. I got a question for the audience here. have you ever experienced a DUI enforcement operation? So have you ever gone through a checkpoint? Have you ever been stopped and had to do FSTs or anything like that? Let us know in the comments. What was your experience like? Do you think it helped? Having these sort of operations help? I know that by law, a lot of these checkpoints have to be posted on social media and in the paper where the checkpoint's going to be. So, you always hear those criticisms. Well, if you tell people where the checkpoint's going to be, they'll just go another way. Well, the legal system has made it such that, we have to post where this checkpoint's going to be. And that maybe that's another wrinkle in this legal system that we gotta iron out, right? So if you have, just let us know in the comments and we'll be sure to talk about that. All right, so
wow.
all of us here on this panel are Black and brown, right? Do you guys think in our communities, in Black and brown communities, that we kind of glaze over driving impaired, drunk driving? Do you think that it's not a big deal in Black and brown communities? What do you think about that, Jackie?
I do think it's something that has to do with their cultures. I mean, especially in Texas and being Hispanic, like a lot of times, like when people, to them, it's like a rite of passage. Or especially if you grew up in Mexico or you live in a border town, like you could just cross the street, you could cross the border and it's like drinking age is 18. So sometimes when they come over, they don't realize what the laws and consequences are. But a lot of times we have that within the community too, like this machismo, like, oh, I'm okay, or I'm not that drunk, or, bus driving is drunk driving. If you feel different, you're gonna drive different. So like Dr. McCowan had said earlier, it doesn't matter if you have 1, if you have 10, impairment is impairment. In Texas, you don't have to be at a 0.08 to get a driving while intoxicated.
Yep.
Anything that impairs you, that affects you, whether it's a drug, a controlled substance, an over-the-counter drug. But I think within our culture, it is minimized. And a lot of times it's like, oh, I'm not that drunk, or I live really close to home, or you hear a lot of people too, like, oh, I don't want to leave my vehicle, or things like that. And it just brings me to something that Matt did, partnered up just a few weeks ago, something that has never been done. So Matt teamed up with Anheuser-Busch and Uber. So we have a campaign that's called Decide to Ride. So it shows, like the PSA shows someone at a bar, and then they get a phone call and they go outside and the parking lot is empty. So that parking lot is empty and all you see is ride shares picking people up or dropping them off. And of course it says you can't drive drunk if you don't drive. And it's something that we need to push more and more. Like, we need to find that alternate way of going out. I hear it a lot too, like, oh, it's too expensive or this and that. But if you have money to buy alcohol, if you have money to go out and party, then you definitely have money to get a safe ride home. That's just my opinion.
Agreed. What do you think, Dr. McCowan? In our Black and brown communities, kind of minimized?
I believe that is minimized. I think that, not everybody, but at times it can be a generational thing. You've seen, it might have been, I've seen my grandparents drink, my uncle was drinking, aunt was drinking. It is okay to drink because I've just seen it. I grew up like that. And again, it's not all, just some. And so I think at times, and this is just a theory I have, but a lot of times people go to drinking because they're dealing with something. And I always encourage people to, instead of going to drinking, go to counseling, go to see a therapist, really, really take advantage of, the services and that's available. Because when you go to drinking, then other things could happen. Drinking can lead to some dangerous things. And so just trying to educate people on different outlets other than drinking to mask whatever you're going through. Whatever situation, whatever you're feeling, I'm feeling down, I lost my job, let me take a drink, let me just, that drinking is not always the way. And so again, it's not just communities of color. I'm sure it's a lot of people have done it, but in communities of color, I've seen it in it is minimized at times.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, I certainly recognize it in my 32 years of being in law enforcement. I've worked all over the city. And I certainly notice in some communities you have more access to alcohol than you do in others. In certain communities, there are, I mean, houses converted to liquor stores and
Yep.
markets, and then you go to other communities and you generally will only see like one store or maybe a big brand store or something like that. But
Yeah.
in a lot of minority communities, the access to alcohol seems to be higher than in other parts, and I'm sure that's a contributor.
True. Yeah, I agree.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So, did you have something to say there, John?
No, I agree. I agree with what Ben said. He's absolutely right.
Yeah. So I know a number of us have children here. I've got one in college, one thinking about going to college here pretty soon. And so we're talking about the drinking age of teens and young adults. And I know we as parents and even friends, we tell them, hey, if you're out, we're not naive to think that you're not going to drink, but if you need a ride, call me at any time, day or night, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd rather you do that than get behind the wheel. Have either of you ever had that conversation, or either of you, any of you ever had to actually go out? I know it's easy to say, call me, but then when that call comes at 2 o'clock in the morning, or did you actually get up and go? Has anyone ever had that situation where they actually had to go out and do?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had that experience. I have 3 daughters, one's 7 and the other's like 25 and 21. They haven't called me, but I've said that to friends. I've said that to police officers. If you're going to go out there and have a drink or something like that, you become impaired or you find yourself impaired, call me. And I've had calls from family members. I've had calls from police officers who've called me, and sure, I've gotten up at 2 in the morning and went out there to pick them up. And you know what? That's the key. The key is to not get behind that wheel. So yeah, I've had that experience.
That's interesting too, that they felt comfortable enough to call you to pick them up, because in our we have a culture too as law enforcement officers, and one of the things that is usually not something that we do is ask for help, call for help. We can handle it. Even though we have these issues that we deal with, hey, we'll deal with it. We don't need your help. And then you find out that, hey, you do need help, and you do need to look for support, and to get through, because we have law enforcement officers that get DUIs as well. All right, plenty of them, in fact. Yep. And and I personally am involved with it because where I work anyway. We deal with law enforcement officers who have found themselves facing some administrative peril as a result of their behaviors. Think of it like detention for law enforcement officers. That is a part of my command and my specialty. So I know alcohol's impact very well on law enforcement officers.
And I want to talk about that as well, because the city that I work for is a college town. We have a college here in my town, so we got a bunch of bars in our town as well. And in the surrounding cities, for years, come to party in our bar district. And for years, my agency had a reputation of being the agency that will actually arrest another cop from another agency for getting a DUI. And that was a black mark on my agency. Well, I look at it the opposite, Again, we talked about being held to a higher standard, and if you chose to get behind the wheel, then, you get no breaks coming. So that's just a little experience with my agency, and not so much anymore, but maybe they learned not to not to drink and drive through my city. But yeah, for a long time, that was the mark about my city.
Oh, yeah.
And down in San Diego too, I'm sure.
Well.
Yeah.
I have a question for y'all. So, in the college towns that y'all work in, what about those situations where someone slips something in somebody's drink? And then they get, because a lot of times you have, students who, they may have been to a party, they've been drinking, but they didn't know something would slip in their drink. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with that situation?
Well, just from my standpoint, understanding if a person's driving and they're impaired, when we arrest them, because if you're driving and you're impaired, whether someone slips something in your drink or not, you're going to be arrested, and that will be
Mhm.
part of the statement that you give. If you give a statement, I will record that and document that, right? And then, unfortunately, I think it is incumbent upon that individual's legal advisor to really draw that out and help to prove that that's what took place. And I'll explore it
Yeah.
if a person can tell me, hey, this person I was with, they did something. I'll explore that, right? But that won't invalidate the fact that they've been arrested for being impaired, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And unfortunately, my experience has been when someone is slipping something in another's drink, it's not so that they can drive. It's usually so they can take advantage of them sexually. And those are the sorts of cases that I've seen, and those are the ones that we investigate. Those people are normally victims, and we pursue that, wholeheartedly, full steam ahead on those, because those are the ones that, slip a Mickey in someone's drink. It's usually a female by a male. And those are the cases usually when someone's getting something slipped in their drink. So
Yeah. And when you find those folks usually aren't driving. They are so
exactly,
overwhelmed by whatever they're impaired with that we got to call them an ambulance, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I only say that because I know of a situation where there was a young lady who was at the club, and she ended up leaving, and then all of a sudden she blacked out, and come to find out somebody slipped something in her drink.
right.
Um,
Yeah, and those are the situations that do happen in bars, and um, we have patrols that go out and patrol the bars, but those things are hard to see, and that's why
yeah,
education, when you having your daughters, even your sons, going to drinks, never. My wife used to talk about that when she was younger. When she went out with her girls, never leave your drink, never let somebody else buy your drink. Those sorts of things you got to educate yourself
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
facts.
Yep. All right, guys, this was a powerful conversation here. And VVV on Facebook says, seems like a lot of people don't realize that over-the-counter prescriptions, yes, we didn't talk about that, is part of DUI. It's just not alcohol. People need to be educated about that. Most ignore the bottle label warnings. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got
Yeah,
a lot of those warnings say do not operate heavy machinery. And what is a car? What is a truck? Heavy machinery.
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wanted, and there's something, and I don't know if Jackie, you want to elaborate on this, but the HALT Act is another is something that MAD has stood behind, and that's, I mean, on a, I guess on a national level, that's something that came to mind. I was thinking about that. I was like, we really sitting here quiet, not knowing what's out there.
Hey,
But
sometimes
the
when you get put
HALT
on the
Act,
spot, you just black out. Yeah.
but really, but it's sad because even though there is the HALT Act, there's still not it's still not anything on
Not enough.
a national level that I can think of. But anyway, the HALT Act is will it's kind of like new technology that they put in cars that can detect if you have been drinking and driving, and that's something that MAD has definitely stood behind. I believe that it was passed in the House and Senate. But again, correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie. But that is something that will be highly effective, having that technology in the car, because you literally cannot move. Once the car detects that you have been drinking and drink and you have been drinking, I'm sorry, and then you attempt to drive, the car won't even budge.
Yeah, we have probation
Yeah.
Yeah.
systems that do that once you've been convicted of drunk driving, and then the court system can make you install those in your cars. But wow, they're thinking about doing that on every car nationally, huh?
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
know I saw a comment earlier at the bottom of the screen that someone said that. But yeah, the HALT Act, passed in the Senate. So it's called for technology neutral rule marketing that could involve a variety of drunk driving prevention systems, including driver monitoring, which can detect signs of distracted, impaired, or fatigue driving, and alcohol detection. So just the way, I mean, years ago, we didn't have seatbelts, we didn't have airbags. So it's something that too, that advanced technology system there, we have a campaign to eliminate drunk driving, and that's one of the 4 steps. It's advanced vehicle technology system. So having vehicles, just the way you can add certain features to cars, having that feature that it could detect any amount of alcohol, whether it's by breath or even touch. So it's something that,
Wow.
we're on our way. Like obviously if you have kids, you could put at 0. And as an adult, you could set it at a different level. But it's something that we're moving forward to having nationwide.
Yeah, well, all these other things, they got self-driving cars. I don't see why they couldn't do that, right? Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, guys, this was a very powerful conversation. I appreciate each of you for coming on and sharing your knowledge and your experience and your stories with us. It was a great conversation. Before we let you go there, I wanted to give you a chance one by one to say something to our audience on the way out, something that you think they should know. So we'll start with you, Lieutenant Gutierrez, something you want our audience to be left with.
You know, that the decision to drink and operate a motor vehicle comes with dire consequences. It changes folks' lives, not for the better, but for the worse. And I really would like everyone to think before they drink. Do not take that sip. Get a designated driver, and just think of others other than yourself.
Agreed. Sorry about that. We were talking about that mute button. It'll get you, right? It got me that time. It got me that time. Appreciate you on there, Lieutenant Jackie.
Yeah, so again, with MADD, we're not saying don't drink, we're saying don't drink and drive. You know, if you've heard throughout this whole conversation, we haven't said an accident. With MADD, it's not an accident. A drunk driving, it's a crash. You're choosing to get behind the wheel. You're choosing to drive in that impaired state. An accident is something that we can't prevent, that we can't avoid. And again, just the way we're planning the perfect outfit for any event or Halloween coming up, the perfect Halloween costume, we need to plan the perfect way of how we're going to get back home. I met a little girl a few years ago in the parking lot, and the first thing she asked me was how much. She was a victim of a drunk driver. The drunk driver was her own mother. You know, she was underage driving, and it left her child paralyzed and blind. But something that Crystal Lynn always asks you, she wants to know how much. And at first I was like, what does she mean? And she wants to know, how much do you love her? So it's something that I ask everywhere that I go and do presentations. How much do you love yourself? How much do you love your loved ones? How much do you love your families, to make that choice to not drink and drive?
Love that. Love that. And last but certainly not least, Dr. McCowan.
So I'm just going to keep it real short and simple. And it's easy. Now, everybody should know this. What do you think I'm going to say? Don't drink and drive. Simple. Don't be selfish. Don't get behind the wheel. Get a designated driver. Don't drink and drive. That's it.
Easy. We should all know that, but sometimes we don't.
Easy.
Just like we all talked about here. Easy. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that's why we're here. Keep reminding people. Yep. Be responsible whenever you get behind that wheel for whatever reason. Alcohol, marijuana, Tylenol. If it's going to affect you driving, don't do it. Don't do it. All right. Again, we appreciate you.
Any type of drug.
Any type of drug. Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely, meth and coke and all that. But yeah, we talking about prescription drugs. Yeah. Oxy, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So again, I appreciate the three of you for coming on. I love the conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk on the other side. And yeah, we appreciate you guys.
Thank you for
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you.
Yo, Ben, what was up? That was a
deep,
dope conversation. That was deep, right?
It was. Yeah, I was like, man, I'm feeling emotional. What is going on here? Right?
Yes.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
I felt the weight.
Yes, I felt it too, man. But we need those. We need those. I hope everybody got something good out of that. I know I did. I love the conversation. Yeah, man. Yeah. So everybody, take heed what was spoken today, man, because this is real. This is real. People dying. Yeah. So I appreciate you stepping in for Elizabeth today, Ben. And hey, man, I see you on the other side when we're gonna do our show. I know we've been laxing on that, but we're gonna do that. We're gonna get back on that, right?
Yeah, we need to. You wanna know what's funny is we get into conversations like this, and I know I saw the list of all the questions, all that. You know, once you start talking, the conversation just takes its own life and just grows and flows the way it wants to go.
And it did.
Yeah.
All right. We appreciate everybody for checking out Black and Blue Live today. My name is Dale. That's my man Ben. We'll see you next time. We out. Peace.
Peace.